Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week, I do a rundown of a game that may or may not be done by the time I'm actually recording this. And that being Dragon Quest XI. I did a review of Dragon Quest VIII, either first or second year into these podcasts, and I decided to do Dragon Quest XI before doing Nier. And now that I'm doing both, it seems perfect timing that I do both eventually for podcast reviews. And the nice thing about doing these for review purposes is I have it right in my head. I'm doing everything that I know off the cuff. So, for a change every once in a while. This will be spoilerific review, as for most of the things that I've already done on the channel. Because when I do a thing for YouTube, it's done and dusted. I'm never really touching it again. There's so many other games going on that it's like, this is the definitive, by and large, done. And the nice thing about Dragon Quest XI is it doesn't do anything that Dragon Quest VIII didn't do. It doesn't do anything Dragon Quest 7 or 6 or whatever. It just does it on a different scale. And does it on a different system, that being the PS4. The definitive S edition is also on the Switch, so I'll kind of go back and forth talking about both. But by and large, most of them are the same. But storyline-wise, Dragon Quest is its own self-contained thing. You don't really need to do all of the games. You can kind of pick up them wherever. Usually, I've said 5, 8, and 11 are kind of the best ones, but people can go with 4 or 3 or whatever one they want to. And you're going to be in good shape regardless, because you know what you're getting with Dragon Quest. And it's turn-based goodness. It's a little goofy at times, sometimes pretty dark, as in the case with this game a bit. And yeah, the best parts about this are the characters, some of the visuals, and there's just enough Dragon Quest stuff to go around that you need something like this. You need that old school vibe to stem the tide and, I think show that, hey, there's still an audience for this sort of thing. You don't need to reinvent the wheel like you do with Final Fantasy. So Final Fantasy could do this thing, Dragon Quest can do that thing. Let Dragon Quest do its thing, because that's why Yakuza is so great now, or Like a Dragon is so great now. Is because did you know that Yakuza is a fan, like the guy Ichiban is a fan of Dragon Quest? I'm sure he mentioned it about 10 times while he was beating the shit out of dudes in Yakuza 7. Just thought I'd mention that. But yes, Dragon Quest is great, and as stated with 8, I got into it with 8, so I was a late starter. But I grew into it, and it's been a go-to franchise when it gets releases. Not so much the spin-off contents. I mostly stick with the main lines, though I have tried Heroes and whatnot. I might talk about those every once in a while, but it wasn't like something I wanted, like I was big onto. They have stuff like Rocket Slime, which is cool. Monster Quest, Dragon Quest Jokers and monsters, and they've got I think they called something called Dragon Quest Treasures, which actually follows one of the characters in this game and a storyline there. But this is going to be mostly talking about Dragon Quest XI and the S version. So I'm playing the OG version because that's the one I had access to. I didn't really feel like buying the S version just to do a few extra side things for the channel. The real difference with the S version is a little bit balancing, bit of remastering, a few extra things, and a 2D mode. There's also something known as Talkington or Talkington Town, I believe that's what it's called, where you do a lot of like old school quests for, hey, we're revisiting a thing from a thing that you'd remember, and do some stuff to get some prizes. It's a minor thing. They take like 30 minutes to an hour at most. But it's extra content to be had, and the 2D version is different, because this game is in 3D. Most of the games up after 6 were in 3D. I think 8, I forget if 7 or 8 was the first one to do 3D. But what sets Dragon Quest XI apart? Well, I will say this. As much as I don't like silent protagonists, and I will never like silent protagonists, this is the game that tries its hardest out of any game I've ever seen to make you like a silent protagonist. Doesn't really succeed, but it damn sure wants you to believe that this guy is an actual person with actual feelings. Because it's weird, because when he's a kid, he has actual feelings and actual emotions about being a kid and having a friend in a town known as Cobblestone. And then he grows up and he doesn't speak. Don't ask me. It's dumb. Silent protagonists are dumb. News at 11. Anyway, Dorkface is known as the Luminary. So he's in Cobblestone. But apparently he's obviously from somewhere else because he wouldn't be the Luminary otherwise. But he saves his friend Gemma from falling off a cliff and he zaps a bird. His mom says, hey, go to Heliodor because this king has told us, hey, do the thing that you're supposed to do. That king throws him in jail. He finds a dude named Eric who says, hey, help me out, do some shit. So they keep running away from this guy named Hendrik and Jasper. So obviously, shit's going bad. So instead of being called the Luminary, he's being called the Darkspawn. And I have to say it that way because that's what Jasper calls it. Darkspawn. And then you have Hendrik going, Darkspawn! You know, I just had to do it. I had to turn away from the mic. Hopefully it's not too bad. Anyway, so they're chased around over and over and over by Heliodor soldiers, and they keep doing side quests and, you know, plot quests and stuff. They fight monsters, they do things. Eric is a thief. He's looking for some orbs that are like gigantic, like they're as big as your fucking head. Don't ask me. Like I understand the illusion of how does Link carry all the 20 or 30 fucking items in his bag and swords and armor. You know, this is stretching it a little bit because the giant orbs are as big as their fucking heads. Anyway, so they gotta find orbs to get to Yggdrasil. So along the way, they find people. They find Veronica, who's a mage who has lost her age because people stole her magic. So now oh god, I don't want to get in trouble. I'm not gonna say either words I don't want to say. So let's just say she becomes a child, but she's not a child. She's a teenager. Anyway, her twin sister Serena is a bit of a, like, she's super nice. She's just kind of doofy sometimes and loses her way. But they're together. They're from Arborea, and they've been looking for the Luminary. And you can tell that Eric is getting kind of annoyed because every time people learn about the Luminary, they're like, well, it's good to know that you're popular. I'm sick of hearing about how great you are. Let's get going. So it's kind of funny because Eric's just a guy. You know, he's a thief, but he's just a guy. For a while, anyway. His backstory doesn't come until way later. I don't think even at time of recording we deal with it. So we'll get to it. But yes, Veronica and Serena are twin sisters from Arborea who have been sworn to protect the Luminary with black magic and white magic specifically. They go to a couple of their towns. They deal with a fucking dumbass. It's weird because in 8 they deal with this whiny, like, prepubescent or teenage dork who's trying to marry Medea, who doesn't want to do anything, and then they go to Dragon Quest XI. They do another prince, just a lot thinner, but also he's like endearing in like the stupid way. Charmels is just frustratingly annoying and a pompous asshole. Ferris is just skittish and just yeah, you know, that, I don't know, but the noises and all the weird shit, he doesn't want to do anything. He's a fucking lazy fuck. So I mean, lazy but almost endearing in his charmless just being a dick. Anyway, so he gets them to do a thing, but all the while they find this dude named Sylvando, who's the best character of the game. And you get hints that he's this awesome dude who has knights training And he totally is, but he's also a jester. So he knows all the fancy tricks and wants to make people happy. And he's just great. Every time you walk into a town, he's like, oh, this place is great. I'm going to go do things. And wake up! And you can see that veneer. But he doesn't really have a veneer. It's this, like, he doesn't want to be a knight. He wants to be a jester. And everybody's confused. So how is he so good at all his shit? Well, it's because he's Sylvando, darling. It's great. So they keep going and they keep going. They find this tournament in Octagonia and they meet a couple other characters, Rab and Jade, who are also awesome. Rab is the king of Dundrasil, the place in the beginning of the game, and Luminary's grandfather. Once again, they put a lot of effort into trying to make Dorkface actually interesting. Jade is somebody from Heliodor, is actually King Carnelian's daughter, and she kicks all of the ass. If it weren't for Sylvando, Jade would be the best character of the game. And she stabs people with spears, or she kicks people in the face with kicks. And Rab uses like dark magic, and he's like a jack of all trades, much like Sylvando. Sylvando's more of an attacker and a support character. Rab is a mage, but Jade stabs. Did I mention she likes to stab things and hits people really hard because it's funny? So they keep going and they keep going and they keep going. They end up getting all of the orbs. But this is the key to the game, is they actually pull a Final Fantasy VI. So again, spoiler warning if you haven't played Final Fantasy VI. I mean, you probably heard what goes on in Final Fantasy VI, but the same thing applies here. So they've been trying to track down this character known as Mordegon, who is the final boss. Turns out he was King Carnelian this entire time. So as soon as they get to Yggdrasil, Jasper, who's been, serving him because he's a fucking asshole, stops them with another orb called the Purple Orb, and Mordegon takes the Sword of Light and turns it into the Sword of Dark, which looks disgusting. And that's pretty much where I'm at as far as the time of recording. I did a little bit after that, but yes, Luminary and everybody else gets scattered, and you do the searching for friends bit. And you keep going, you keep going, you keep going, you do stuff. What you find out is Earth's been scorched. The land of the mermaids that saved you is dead, because other things just beat the shit out of it and scared them and ate them or destroyed them, all manner of shit. The sky is all dark and purple. All sorts of crap. So you have to save the world. It's a lot like Ocarina of Time in that sense. Like, you can revert some of the things, but there are only so many things you can do. People are still dead. You can't bring them back. But you find that in Heliodor and in Cobblestone, there's a hero known as Hendrik. So the sort of nice, but by the book Steiner-esque character, as opposed to Jasper, who's a complete asshole, has been doing his best to atone, as has the king, who was being controlled, and is trying to keep everybody, like Final Fantasy 15 style, in the shelter of the world, basically, because all the world's turned to shit. So yes, Final Fantasy 6, Final Fantasy 15, yeah, just the world going to shit, you gotta save it, that sort of thing. Ocarina of Time. So a lot of parallels. It's not the first game to do that. It's the first Dragon Quest game to do that, though. And I give them credit, because most Dragon Quest games, they let you save the world, before disaster strikes. And I think 11 was the first that actually let disaster happen. Veronica dies. And yeah, post-game wise, you can actually change it. Part of the post-game content is to stop Mordegon before it begins, now that you're more powerful, and also have MacGuffins and shit. So if you wanted to save Veronica's life, you can go back and redo it. Again, that's post-game content, and it's kind of like, is it really necessary? I don't know. But it is a thing you can do. So it's a thing you can do. And I do respect that the game gives you the world of ruin of sorts. Find your friends again. They're all doing their own thing. Jade has been corrupted by this Ooga Booga, and wearing a bunny costume and kicking the shit out of dudes, and it's interesting. Don't ask me. So Octagonia becomes a pleasure quarters for monsters. Heliodor becomes a place where it's just, well, let's kill the shit out of humans. Nautica gets destroyed. All manner of shit. Sniffelheim just, yeah, Eric gets lost in the shuffle. Sylvando's at Nom and trying to help. Rab is going to a mountain, trying to re-engage with training so that he can kick the shit out of Morrigan. So you do the typical get your party back and all that. Eric gets his own thing. Turns out that he has a backstory with his sister, and that's where the Dragon Quest Treasures thing comes in. As a prequel or a sequel, I forget. I haven't played it, but essentially she gets a Midas touch, and it becomes a problem, and he has to solve it. So that's the Sniffelheim thing. So all the areas you've been to, they redo, but they redo in a different way. So they're not. Some games will like retread ground and will say, hey, you go to another dungeon that's part of the same dungeon that you were at before. Isn't that great? It's retracing steps, but you're doing different parts of that. So at least they give them some credit. But you do all of the things, and you get your party back. And then you find a way to fly up to the Fortress of Fear. Because what self-respecting villain doesn't have a floating fucking continent? Again, I'm saying this because Dragon Quest can get away with it, but it's still obvious when they do the cliches. But yes, they do the Fortress of Fear. They fight off Jasper. And then they fight Morrigan. And that boss fight, fucking annoying, because he splits into two things. And I think he shares a health bar. I think what happens is he switches his place sometimes, and it's really frustrating. But you get him, and the thing goes. And the world's back to normal. Unless you do, again, want to... normal-ish. I don't think it completely, nothing goes back to normal. Like, Serena is alone. But the world, all of Morrigan's tricks and shit, they try to get back to square one. So it's kind of like beating Kefka in the sense that, yeah, the world's still turned to shit. There's not much you can do. Veronica's gone. So how do we get her back? And therein lies the post-game. The post-game is hard, and I've played through a little bit of it, and man, it is rough. It takes a lot more technique and skill than I'm really qualified for, so I'm not really going to do Act 3. A lot of people are kind of iffy on Act 3 anyway, because you're kind of retconning Veronica's sacrifice. You're retconning a lot of the stuff that could happen with Hendrik and other people. So if you don't go through all of that shit, it's kind of weird. Just to keep Veronica in the party. I mean, it's a nice gesture and it's a cool what if scenario, but it's also like you're dealing with, oh yeah, these bosses are hard as fuck. It's not mandatory. Once you beat Morrigan, the game's over. So bear that in mind if you play Dragon Quest. It's like, you don't have to beat Act 3. It's just a second scenario. It's like second quest, except they redo it, So it's like second quest in some of the Zelda games, just a different plot thread. And it's not that big of a plot, It's not like it's going to replace Act 2, which is why I think Act 2 is the main ending, the canon ending. But battle system wise, anything I said in Dragon Quest VIII is the same here. Recertifications, battle systems, skill trees, sticking with one weapon. I wish I'd stuck with Jade as a freaking, because I went into fisticuffs and then I realized, no, just go spears. Yeah, so I just went spears, and now I'm doing shit tons more damage because I'm not stupid. Because fisticuffs in VIII, you had a skill called Thin Air, which was these really crazy powerful AoE attacks. I don't know if you get those in this game. So I was, I was trying something different. It didn't work, and you get 2 or 3, weapons for each character. You get swords and great swords. You get spears and spears and claws, stabs and claws. Everybody gets 1 or 2 weapons. They get their base weapon. So you can change it up. There there are weapons that are kind of the gear that you want, but then you can always mess with different things. Like Eric and Sylvando, I think, have this like crazy OP fucking move where if you poison a dude, you do 6 times normal damage. So you have to inflict poison, so you can use one of them to actually inflict the dang thing, and then Eric or Sylvando can do the 6 times damage. It's nasty as shit, and it's powerful. I didn't want to do that for this playthrough, but I'm doing well regardless, because Hero is going Great Swords and Wrecking Face. Jade is going Spears, like I should have done early, and is Wrecking Face. So the nice thing is that the party is well-rounded, and you can change them to suit whatever you need, but the game is not going to really penalize you too much, because you can recertify, you can change what skills you were using and leveling up if you think that they're just not all that good, and then putting them back in different spots. And then it expands in Act 2, so you get even more stuff to work with. So Luminary gets more access to his healing, he gets more access to his crazy fucking zapper skills, which are fun. Gets higher level sword skills, all that fun junk. Jade gets a thing called Revamp, which is based on her, weird brainwashing shit that she goes through. So she gets a buff to her stats. Everybody else gets an expanded spell list. Serena gets everything Veronica had, so she turns into just the ultimate mage of doom, and just learns everything that Veronica had. So she's very useful. Again, I'm using Rab because he's to a lesser extent the same thing, just innately more, I would say, physical oriented. But again, she does a lot of like crazy support skills against breath attacks, which is neat. A breath and elemental stuff. So Serena's really good. Hendrik is just, hey, I can guard people against guard things because I'm paladin. Sylvando can do a little bit of everything. You're gonna find some sort of fun thing for all the characters to do, and you can experiment. So if you do a playthrough and you're like, well, I don't really want to do it the same way, you don't have to. You can change a person's class just to see it. And the best part is, while you have a main party, your game doesn't end until the rest of the party dies. So all of your characters have to go down. I think the only other time I've seen that was Final Fantasy XII, and it's kind of neat that you can actually have your support characters save you. So if your main party goes down, you're not dead. As long as you've given them equipment and given them skills and not neglected them, they can save your ass in a pinch. So that's good. That's a good feature. What's also another good feature, and it's a holdover from Dragon Quest IX and the 8 remake for the 3DS, is no random encounters. Yay! As has been borne out for a lot of the games that I've been playing, especially remaster versions, I don't care for random encounters. I don't care if Dragon Quest did them in old school times. They stopped doing it, and I'm grateful for it, because I can run the fuck away. I've gone through certain dungeons without fighting an enemy, because I'd already beat up some metal slimes or whatever, and I had a good enough level, and I could just fight the boss. That is my want to do. That is my choice. Because again, you're allowed to pick and choose, and especially when you're doing quest lines and you're supposed to fight certain enemies with certain skills, like certain pep-up powers, which are like half limit breaks, half, boosts to your stats. The way those fights work is you have to beat certain enemies with a certain skill, and it's annoying if you'd have to keep rummaging through fights, not knowing that the fight you want is the one. Now you can pick and choose. Yeah, there are different fights in different different organizations. Like there's 3 monsters here and there's only one in this grouping, or what, different groupings, but you can see, okay, this is the enemy I need to kill, so let me fight that one. Let me run away from a fight. Let me go find a treasure chest or something. I'm allowed to do that. Yay! So much like my silent protagonists suck rant, random encounters suck rant. Hooray! I get to do 2 of my hated rants in one. Yay! I'm in a good mood. Anyway, but if you wanted the random encounters, all you really have to do is play the second game, or the second version, the 2D version. Because I know Dragon Quest still has, Zoom, Evac, and Holy Protection. And Holy Protection guards you against random encounters if you don't want to. Not really necessary in the 3D version, but hey, it's there. They do enough with the conventions and things that it keeps things moving. Once you know what the battles are, you know how to fight. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel. Sadly, unfortunately, it also extends to the music, which is one of the few things that Dragon Quest XI got lambasted for when it came out. The creator, Yui Horii, is around 70 or 80. And until he passed away, the composer, Sugiyama, was like pushing 90. And either he was trying to make money from a CD or a DVD or a Blu-ray or whatever the fuck, or he was just a lazy son of a bitch. Because he did not do orchestral versions of the soundtrack until the S version. He did the opening theme with orchestra, but either reused assets from some songs, specifically ones I remember from Dragon Quest VIII, which may have been from way earlier, if I'm being honest, but they were MIDI. And that's something that is stuck in the non-S version, is there's no orchestral soundtrack. And nobody's a fan of that, which I don't blame you. Like, you can get away with that, I say, in something like Final Fantasy VII, but once you got to Final Fantasy VIII, like, Uematsu went full orchestral. And there might have been some MIDI arrangements here and there, but after a while, it's kind of an expectation. Not saying you don't have to. It's more that it was a money-making scheme that nobody really wanted. So if I was to say there's any criticism of the game other than the Luminary being a guy who could talk and then suddenly couldn't, as soon as he grew up to our age, I don't know. Knowing that a lot of the music is reused assets is kind of cheesy. I mean, reusing the sound effects is totally fine because you have staples. You have the the leveling up jingles, the when you beat an enemy, little things. You can do sound effects. I think it's when you reuse music and you don't really retool it. You don't give you anything new. And the fact that they had to re-enter and reorganize and do an orchestral soundtrack for the S version speaks to how annoying the first one was. I'm more annoyed by reusing assets, because I remember specifically there was Star Ocean 5. I remember I was walking to and from a place, and I'm walking down a dirt path, and there's a town, and it's like this big magic town or some shit that I'm supposed to go to. And I distinctly remember a song that I loved from Star Ocean 3, because that's the one I remember playing the most. I think it was like the Aquios theme or something. And I'm like, why are you using the Aquios town theme while walking to a place that's not Aquios? It just seems kind of strange. Like, if you're going to reuse battle themes, I mean, there are some things there. But yeah, it was not fun. And again, I know the guy was pushing 90 and he passed away a few years later, but it wasn't the best. It wasn't the best look. And his and Sugiyama's reputation was kind of dragged through the mud in later years, and it was just an annoyance. But as far as Dragon Quest itself goes, if you played a Dragon Quest game, if you like a Dragon Quest game, if you've tried or wanted to get into a Dragon Quest game, would I recommend 11? Absolutely. I mean, I would recommend Yakuza Like a Dragon if you like a Dragon Quest game, and a Pokemon game, and a Persona game, any turn-based game. Legitimately, I would go for it. But Dragon Quest is what Final Fantasy isn't, and I've accepted to an extent that Final Fantasy always changes. Dragon Quest, by and large, at least as long as Horii is in charge, has not changed, and thank Christ for that. Because we need games to know what they are. And I think that's important, and I think that's something that can be respected. Because when you know what's on a box and you get, oh hey, this is the 11th in a Dragon Quest line, well, I wonder what kind of game it is. And then, lo and behold, it's a Dragon Quest game. It's good. I don't have to question. I mean, you can question, because after a certain point, what ends up happening, and I've made this, I know I've kind of made this one of the few things that I harp on in my channel, is the music, the album scenario. Like, if you're a creative person, you're allowed to change all you want. That's fine. But you also have to respect that you have a branding. You have to respect that when people are, buying a thing for the first time or trying a thing for the first time. Yeah, I understand you want to change with the times and make more money or change things to include for a new audience, but you also have to respect the people that were your audience before. And if you suddenly go from And Justice for All to Black Album, which did piss a lot of people off, to Load and Reload, which really did, but it made Metallica tons of money. But at the same time, I'm again stating, what is Metallica? What is their sound? What is their vibe? What are they going for? I couldn't really tell you. They're Metallica. Final Fantasy is Metallica, right? Dragon Quest is like Megadeth or Motorhead. It'll change every once in a while, but unless they're doing something stupid like Risk or Super Collider, they're not changing so drastically that you can't do it. It might piss people off that they're doing the same album every 2 years, but for the people who have respected that and understand that and know, hey, it's another one of those. Is it as good as that? Because, yeah, the albums may not work. The games may not be the best quality every single time out. But when you know what's on a box and you can say to people all the time, say on Reddit or whatever, you say, hey, is this a game I'd like to play? What is a Dragon Quest game? You can define it as turn-based RPG, whimsical-looking thing with the guy from Dragon Ball, cool-looking vistas and crazy people with, crazy monsters with puns for names and puns for town names, and you go and look for mini-medals and you fight a monster that has darkness in its name somewhere, and you stab it with swords and you stab it with other things. What makes it slightly different? You don't veer too much out of the ordinary. And there's something to be respected for that. And again, Dragon Quest has dabbled, and that's where I draw the line. If you want to do side questy bullshit and spin-offs and change and try different things, do it with Dragon Quest Heroes. I don't want Dragon Quest mainline games to be a hero title. I don't want to do Dragon Quest Jokers. I don't want to do Dragon Quest Monsters. That's what side content, that's what spin-off games are for. I don't want a Minecraft Dragon Quest game. That's what Dragon Quest Monsters is, or Dragon Quest Builders, excuse me. They have so many of them. But that's what spin-off content's for. When you go mainline, the expectation is this is the one that you're going to stake your claim on. And I can stake the claim that 5, 8, and 11 are very similar. Everybody has a difference on which one is their favorite, right? But 11 continues doing what Dragon Quest was built on from day one. Even though, like I said, I haven't played as much of 1 through 3 as I should, mostly due to lack of access, I can respect the franchise evolving without changing too much. They evolve with technology to do different things, but they haven't changed the DNA of what they're trying to be. And that's good because, again, Square Enix can do what they want to do with Final Fantasy and change every single game for better or for worse if it sells. But you do need to respect the people that don't want the change and also say, look, we're not going to get everybody, but we also can build our audience because we know it. Yeah, Dragon Quest can get away with it because it is the first JRPG, I think. I don't know if they still have the national holiday thing, but the fact that games like Yakuza Like a Dragon have changed into a Dragon Quest game because of Dragon Quest. They had the balls to go from an established brawler that was going very well, and are still going to do that with some of the Kiryu games because they've got a spin-off, and the Ishin games and whatnot, and Judgment. They're going to keep doing that, but still, whenever Ichiban's around, they're going to respect Dragon Quest lore, and because that sold, because Persona 5 sold, there is a market for these games. There's a market for every game. You don't have to turn every game into Nier Automata. You don't have to turn every game into an action game. You don't have to turn Final Fantasy 16 into Dark Souls, or whatever the fuck it was trying to be. So, again, I got on my soapbox. Hooray. Anyway, but again, getting back to the main point, what is a Dragon Quest game? And are you going to find it in 11? Absolutely. The characters are amazing. Sylvando and Jade specifically. Some of the stuff with the Luminary is old hat because why the fuck does this guy not talk? When he talks as a kid, he talks as a normal kid, you know. But the striking thing about Dragon Quest XI is that they do the Final Fantasy VI World of Ruin thing, and they do it with aplomb because they give you the characters that you like. They're smart enough to give you a reason. You're finding that you're going to try and find this Morrigan dude, and it realizes, oh, you're not strong enough, and shit goes south. But you've been invested in these characters on this journey, and now you got to reclaim them. You got to find them. I give them a lot of credit for trying something like that, because they're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but they're also throwing in some new things that Dragon Quest hadn't done or hadn't tried before. And going a bit dark every once in a while gives Dragon Quest a different edge to it. And because Dragon Quest is trying to be a little more kid-friendly on occasion. Not perfectly, not always. Adults still obviously love Dragon Quest quite a bit, but having those darker moments can allow for things like that to be, you know what? It's not trying to be a Persona game. Let's face that. But it's also not trying to be like an insulting your intelligence moment. Dragon Quest is great at knowing what it wants to be and not insulting the intelligence of the player. You know what you got to do. It gives you a platform to try it, and it's perfect. So if you haven't played this game before, I would definitely recommend it. Anyway, that will do it. A half soapbox, half review today. But anyway, it was an excuse to do it because Dragon Quest is great. Anyway, next week will be Ancient Magus Bride. That has way too much fucking stuff to do. How am I going to talk about all of it? I don't know, but I'm definitely going to try. The Halloween episode this year is going to be Witch Hunter Robin. This, another, much like Dragon Quest, I can kind of do off the cuff, really. I've watched it so many fucking times. Speaking of which, Metal Gear Solid 2. They're re-releasing ports. It's still Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3, and other Metal Gear games. So I'm interested to see how Konami somehow manages, hopefully, not to fuck that up. So I might play that, I might not. But into November, we've got Metal Gear, and we have Ascendance of a Bookworm, which is another great anime, which I'm really thrilled that I rewatched, because I ended up liking it way more than I even did when I initially watched them. But anyway, that's what I'm doing going forward. And I'm also going to review a movie. I'm thinking Mortal Kombat. I'll think about it some more. I'm probably going to watch either Mortal Kombat or Ninja Turtles 1, and it's between those two, for sure. But I will review that for the channel as well. Change things up every once in a while. But hey, that's it for today, and I will see you guys next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.